Alicia, yeah, we will, if Alicia comes in, then we will welcome her, but let's get started. Okay, well, hello everyone. I hope you're all having a lovely day so far. I'm extremely excited for all of you to hear all these wonderful voices. We had a pre-run kind of on Friday, and it went well, so I'm really excited for you guys to hear from students all over the state. Just a reminder to all panelists and audience members, this is a pre-recorded event, so it will be available on the SBE's website later today, or maybe a little later than today. Before we begin, I kind of want to acknowledge the purpose of today's discussion. I think in the education world and realm, we get a lot of numbers and data and pretty words like equity and equal access, but I think that we need to humanize those numbers. I think a lot of times we hear these numbers, we're like, oh, okay, I understand that, okay, and it's a repetitive thing. And I think it's important to recognize that it's more than just those pretty words. We have to humanize those numbers. And although the data is important, it doesn't give us proximity to the pain that students feel every day in classrooms, you know? And that's what we need. We need to understand each other. We need to understand the pain. We need to understand the stories, the experiences. So with that being said, I'd like to give the panelists a chance to introduce themselves, give a little blurb. I'm going to go really quick first. My name is Margarita Amezcua. I'm the student board member on the State Board of Education. And yeah, that was my little blurb that I gave a minute ago. So we'll go for the talking order as well. We'll go Shreya, Ali, AJ, Mineva, Jennifer, Shafaq, and okay. So Shreya.
Oh, thank you, Margarita. So my name is Shreya Mehta, and I'm at Hanford High School. I'm on the ASL Student Voice and Advisory Council and our equity.
Hi, my name is Ali Sutherland. I go to Woodinville High School and I'm about to be a senior. I started a petition to add ethnic studies into our curriculum. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
AJ?
Oh yeah, my bad. I'm AJ Jensen Lopez. I go to Bainbridge High School. I'm gonna be a junior, and I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences and hearing others.
Hi, my name is Mineva. I go to Auburn Riverside High School, about to be a junior, and I joined this panelist group because I wanted to help impact the way that teachers and admins view situations on different students and how to handle it.
Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Tran and I go to Foster High School. I'm about to be an upcoming senior and I'm an organizer for the Institute for Community Leadership.
So hi everyone, my name is Shafaq and I also go to Foster High School and I'm gonna be a senior this year, and I'm just here because I want to hear you guys' voices and what impact we can do.
Lovely, thank you guys. Well, you can hear from students all over the state. A lot of what they're saying is that our education is set up in a very binary system. If you don't take these classes, good luck getting into this college. If, oh, you didn't take this class, or you didn't pass this test, well, have fun failing, you know, kind of things like that. And painfully, that ends up affecting BIPOC a lot of the time at a disproportionately high level. So at this point, our overarching question should just be, you see, again, all those numbers, all this data, so what isn't changing, you know? So with that, I want to give you guys the first question. So again, I'm just going to say, it's going to go Shreya, Ali, AJ, Mineva, Jennifer, and then Shafaq, okay? Okay, so our first question today is going to be, what does equity mean to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question to start off with. I mean, it's why we're all here. You know, immediately you hear equity and you think everyone gets an equal opportunity, but it also provides stepping stones for people who maybe are part of like a marginalized community, or they've had issues with some part of their identity. So regardless of that, and regardless of how supportive their parents are or their guardians are, how supportive their community has been, where you live, what school you go to, you are given the same opportunity to be successful, and you are supported to the extent which you need.
Yeah, I would say equity is just making sure that students have what they need. If you look at success, it's kind of like a race. There's some students that get a head start automatically, and then there's other students who are still in the starting line halfway through it. And so, like, what can we do to help those students? Whether it's them having mental health issues, discrimination or family problems or whatever it may be that's holding them back. We're making sure that we're helping them and providing them with the support they need in order to catch up and be just as successful as those other students. It's also having it in our education, making sure that, all students walk into a classroom and they get to learn about their history and their culture and their backgrounds, not just their white counterparts, which is a big issue, and why it's important that we have that in education and just in our schools to make sure that all students are getting what they need.
Yeah, so I see equity as having the resources to make sure everyone can be successful, but then also taking the extra steps to make sure those resources get to those who need it most. And yeah, that's, I kind of see it as, yeah.
Like AJ said, I think it's important that equity is getting the resources to those who need it most, because with equity, a lot of people see mostly just equality, and with equality, that's already past equity. I feel like equality is when you already are equal and you're just maintaining it. But the thing that people miss is with equity, not everyone is equal yet. So getting those to those who actually need it and not just providing more help for those who are already past the finish line, that's the most important step. And helping those who can't maintain a status or high status in their academic or career path choice. I think that's what equity would truly mean for me.
I think Mineva made a pretty good point about what the difference between equity and equality. Like, equity is equal opportunities for base and filling in based on each individual's needs, while equality is that everyone gets the same thing. And as an example, to add to the metaphor of like distance runners, everyone can start on the starting line. That's equality. But what equity could also mean is that a coach can also help out certain athletes that need help to get more practice, so they can be at the same level, if not the same level, but so they can be up par as their other runners.
So, and to me, so equity means that when you're able to experience like fair treatment and opportunity. At the same time, I also feel like it's able to take out obstacles towards a specific group of people, because in our community, we have a lot of like diversity and people from all over the place. And so equity is when you're able to like give equal opportunity, and know it also has to do with discrimination as well, in my perspective.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really quick, we have one more panelist. Alicia, go ahead, you can introduce yourself and then feel free to answer the first question of equity, okay?
Hi everyone, I'm so sorry for being late. I was stuck in a work meeting earlier, which is why I'm a few minutes late, but hopefully I'm not too late. So my name is Alicia Ing. I graduated recently from Renton High School this past spring, and I am going to be a incoming freshman at UW this fall studying business. And hopefully I'm going to take that degree into DEI work, so diversity, equity, inclusion. I wanted to be part of this panel, and I really took advantage of the opportunity to speak today because I care a lot about the diversity that's within my community, and I know how impactful it's been in shaping myself and the direction that I want to take my life and my work in. I've had a lot of experience working in advocacy for diversity and inclusion, also affordable housing, and I am also working for a nonprofit which is targeted towards providing resources for students navigating the college admissions process and college and career counseling. So that's why I'm here. And yeah, so thank you so much. And to answer the question that we've already been talking about, I agree completely with what everyone else has been saying about making sure that there's a distinction between equity and inclusion. I think that's so important, and it's really not talked about enough. For me, also, in terms of equity, I think that accessibility is a huge part of it, whether we're talking about accessibility to mental health counseling, we're talking about accessibility to career and college counseling. It's not enough just to say that we have these opportunities available for students, but we need to make sure that these opportunities are being presented to students in a way that they can really access them, and that helps them with wherever they want to take their life, especially considering like post-secondary options. So yeah.
Yes, thank you, everyone. The next question will be, what is a misconception you guys think that a lot of adults have about students as it relates to equity?
Yeah, the first thing that really comes to mind is just the fact that so many teachers or administrators aren't aware that students, or don't really acknowledge that students really want to be a part of the conversation. The thing is, to be doing all of this equity work and to be like planning, like, oh, this is how we're going to start teaching this, but never getting any input from, your students of color or any other students that are being impacted by your new changes, you're basically just running in the dark. You don't know what's going on. It's a good step, but you need to incorporate student voice. And I think a lot of administrators, and it's great that the state board wants to kind of be hearing us about this, just listening to student voice, because that's how we know that we're heading in the right direction and how we know what changes to make.
Yeah, I totally agree with Shreya. I also think bringing back in the conversation of equity versus equality, a lot of teachers look at it as a fact of, oh, well, we'll treat every student the same, and we'll make sure that every student gets the same treatment as everyone else, when really we need to start recognizing the challenges that some students go through and how we can help them with those challenges and push them up to get them to the same level of success that other students can get to so easily. Also, something that I think needs to be addressed is, when a student is failing or struggling in their classes or whatever, we call them, not hardworking or not trying hard enough, when really, you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know what's going on internally. You don't know any part of their personal life. Students aren't just machines that can do homework and come to classes all day and deal with drama or whatever it may be that you go to school to and see. But also, there's so many things that go unnoticed that students are going through, and we need to start taking accountability and making sure that students feel safe and feel like they're getting what they need.
So yeah, kind of like for the teachers and stuff, they're kind of like, they should be more open-minded, I would say, instead of grouping kind of students, because every student's so different in their own way. And then misconceptions, we don't want to, we have a lot to say, and they just sometimes assume that we don't want to speak. They just give us big titles or something, and then our actual ability to achieve what we want to do is kind of limited. So I think, misconception that we don't want to always talk or speak out or have big jobs or tasks. And then also, I think that summarizes it.
I agree with a big part of what Shreya said, for never incorporating a student's opinion. This summer, I was in a student equity cohort group, and that was the most I've ever heard ever. And in school, we have surveys, the schools I've been to, we've had surveys on how we feel comfortability academically. And I feel like the questions there, it's really based on one group. It's kind of more questions on a successful group. And I feel like the issue with that is that when it's based like that, it's hard for the rest of us to see ourselves any other way. Because when we identify that we're not within that group, then we're just seeing ourselves as a lower. And fortunately, I've always been in the privileged academic AP honors groups, so I never had to experience what it felt like. But I know many of my other friends who literally could have been in the same groups as mine if they were presented with the right opportunities and if the counselors reached out more to them. That's bringing also in the equity aspect of not just having resources available, but making sure that you present them well to us, because you can lay it out in front of us, but if you don't show us what is for us and what is not right for us, we're just going to go with whatever you throw us in. And I think that's a big issue and misconception within our school, is that they don't want our input, and that they don't want us to feel like we have a power in choosing where we want to go with this, and that this school is just another place in our academic career pathway. And what they don't realize is that we know that high school especially is a big part of where your college career and your successful pathway goes. And when you don't present opportunities and resources well to us, it is our fault for not taking it upon ourselves to go research more about it. But as our counselors and our teachers, we would expect an extra push and an extra help towards our goals.
I guess something I can't speak for all students, but I think something I've noticed as a student is that I think what teachers I think should do is that they should listen more to students rather than just give them advice about how they should deal with their problems, because each situation is different. And another misconception is that we can, because we are youth, we start petitions, we can do civic engagement, we can do stuff in the community, so we can so I think teachers and staff should and adults should know that we are also human beings, and we also make mistakes as students. And I think that I think as students, what we have to do is that we also have to work together with other teachers and staff to make sure that they are doing what they're doing as teachers, and making sure they are doing their job.
And I feel like a misconception that adults have in school is that a lot of students are like not human at a perspective. Like they'll be like, okay, they have to come to school, they cannot bring their like issues in and all that stuff. But at the same time, there's like kids who also feel like school is the only place they could have a safe place. And sometimes teachers can be a little bit not understanding towards things. And I feel like you'll be penalized for everything you do. Like, for example, if you have like a pet die in your house, and they'll be like, why do you turn it in late? But they'll still say, okay, you got 5% off or like 10% off, but they won't really understand why you had to like do that. And sometimes I feel like they just want us to be perfect, which we can't.
So for me personally, I think that the biggest misconception I've seen that adults have about students is that students will ask for help if they need it. I think that a lot of times at my school that I've seen is we have stuff like college and career counselors. We have stuff like a clinic inside our school that offers mental health counseling and stuff like that. But if students don't know that those opportunities are there and those resources are there, they're not going to know to access it. And on top of that, if they're part of a group that's been traditionally disadvantaged, that's been traditionally, disenfranchised, then they're not going to know that those opportunities will be able to help them. I think that also, I think AJ touched on this, is that just because student positions of leadership exist in schools, so for example, ASB, that doesn't mean that students necessarily have any influence or any impact on the things that happen in our school. I've had in my own experience that I've been on ASB and we've presented things to our administration, but our administration frankly hasn't taken us seriously or hasn't really wanted to spend the time with us to speak about it. So I think that there is a really clear distinction between having a seat at the table and then having a voice in the conversation. And students need to be able to have that voice, because if they're just having a seat at the table just to say that it's there, that's not really impacting our lives and our education in any meaningful ways. So I think that students should definitely have more of an impact, like everyone said, and teachers need to be able to identify students that need help and need resources and encourage them to be connected with them, not just say that they exist.
Yes, so good, so good. I think what I'm hearing from most of you guys is just that intentional specificity actually makes it more universal. The more you bring students, the more you make them feel more comfortable, the more they're going to be engaged. The more you listen to them, the more they're going to be there and present and want to learn and do the things they're supposed to do in a classroom, you know? Just out of curiosity, have you guys experienced anything by like counselors or teachers or admins of like being grouped in one certain thing and then maybe not given an opportunity or maybe pushed towards something or anything like that?
You know, what kind of comes to me, like to mind, is just, again, what Alicia said about how you can be in that situation where it's like, oh, they supposedly have some kind of power or like some kind of voice at school. But speaking from like what we've heard in our little panel and from friends all over the state, ASB has turned completely from that place of, hey, we can give students voice, to a very specific group of students that does not look out for the general well-being of the school. And what comes to mind that's really heart-wrenching is this year at my school, our ASB voted against having a Black Lives Matter assembly in February. You know, all of our speakers were planned, and our executive council decided that the majority of them at like our majority white school would feel too uncomfortable to have that kind of assembly, and it just wouldn't feel applicable to anyone. But, you know, that it's just, and you expect someone, like some kind of teacher, to be like, no, that's not okay. How dare you say that learning about someone else's experience, learning about something really important does not, like, needs to make you uncomfortable. Like, how dare you say that it makes you uncomfortable and cancel it for the entire school? But when an ASB teacher or like advisor is complicit and just like, you know, I don't really care, my hands are tied, it's your thing. When you have that and that person in power doesn't enforce equity either, how many students are missing out? How many students could have learned something or felt more heard? So that's what comes to mind for me, and unfortunately that's a really stick example.
Yeah,
if I can add on to that sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. If I can add on to what Shreya is saying as well, I think that if we're talking about the idea of ASB as student leadership, I think it really is needed to be acknowledged that ASB is kind of a very small, specific demographic of students. Like, for example, that I've seen at my school, ASB is usually the most outspoken kids. It's always the honors kids or the AP or the IB kids. So you're really asking this very small group of students to be able to represent a really diverse demographic of your student population. So, for example, like the students who's working multiple jobs after school, who's being asked to support their families and take care of their siblings, they're not going to have time to go to an ASB meeting after school. So it really isn't fair to just say that ASB is a fair representation of your school if you're not making the conscious effort to invite voices that aren't part of that group that's being represented.
I would say a problem in our school is that we encourage certain groups to do specific things and we discourage other groups to do certain things. So something that I've become aware of more recently from a virtual rally I attended, which 4 Black students spoke at, one of them was talking about how she was discouraged to take higher level courses and do Running Start, all things that I've been encouraged to take. If anything, if I say, I don't want to take this AP class, my counselor will tell me, no, you should take it. And I've heard a lot of my other friends talk about that same situation, as they've always been encouraged to take these higher courses. And that student has just as many credentials as I do, you know, straight A's, great student, very dedicated to many different things, and she was discouraged. So why do we encourage certain students to do something because of what they look like or these preconceived ideas that we have about them, and discourage other students who have the same exact credentials and ability as these other students. I think there needs to be some kind of training or something to tell teachers and counselors, like, if a student is capable, let them take the class. There should be no other factors that are played into that.
I think it's kind of how like sometimes they set like lower expectations for some students versus higher ones. Like I saw during like this last semester, COVID, I have a friend who's a senior, and he didn't like show up to anything, but he's like he works like every day for his family, and just really busy. And they let him. I saw like very few attempts to reach out to him and make sure he's doing the work, and then instead they just graduated him, which is like, I'm happy he graduated and everything, but I wish it kind of like pushed him harder to see maybe like reach bigger dreams he had, and kind of like, I think they kind of set like lower expectations for him, like as the counselors and stuff. And so that was kind of hard to see, but yeah.
Like I said earlier, I've always been a part of the privileged AP students, and I've always been in the higher classes, higher math and everything. So I fortunately haven't experienced any marginalization in my academic world, but, and I hate to bring it, but I'm about to bring in the race, because that's the only time in school that I've ever been marginalized because of my ethnic group. And I shared this on Friday. I guess I'll share it again. But in my middle school, we had a party, and then I mentioned how there was one coconut cupcake, and I'm a Pacific Islander, and the teacher went by and noticed that there was only one in her box. So then she put one down for me and said, "I know how your kind usually likes coconuts." And then from that, I was like, well, I'm allergic to coconuts. And then she switched it out. And, you know, from that was the first time that, and it's sad that was the first time, but that was the first time I really realized, like, oh, wow, I'm different. I am brown. Like, I'm not the same as everyone. And the problem of why that's the first time that I realized that is because that's what teachers kind of push onto us. When they marginalize, you kind of marginalize everyone in the same kind of, we're all the same color, where we don't see color kind of concept. And that is a big thing in this academic world in our school, because when you do that, and then you kind of push that on the white people and the non-white people and our people of color, you make us try to see the same, but then when you treat us different, you make us feel bad. Like, it doesn't just make us seem like, oh, we're brown. Yeah, we get it. It makes us feel bad for being ourselves. And, you know, from that, I really realized, okay, I have to start changing something, because my mindset before that, I would view my own self, I would view my own people as lesser than me, just because that's what I was always surrounded by. And our school really, they subliminally put that into our mindsets without even knowing it, by putting all the colored people in the standard classes, putting majority white people in the AP and IB classes. And I've noticed that in most of my AP classes too as well. I think only one of my classes had at least 2 Black students. And I'm like, there's so many others that could be in this group. And I know that this class is not full because there's like 3 rows of seats that could be available. And I think that also goes and ties with the equity factor on presenting resources. When you don't present resources because you're already marginalized a group on not being capable of taking these classes, it really, that messes with the students' mental health and how they view themselves. And, you know, you may not think that affects them at all, but that could also be a leading factor on why they're turning this stuff in late, why they don't want to come to school. It's because they feel that personal effect that they are not enough from this marginalized concept in their mind, that they can't do this and they can't pass this test, they can't be placed into these classes, okay, then I must not be enough. And, you know, I've experienced that firsthand with my own family member, that she felt that she wasn't enough. So that's why her freshman year, it just went down the drain, because that's how she felt in her classes. And like Shreya said last Friday, mirror and window kind of teaching, when you don't see yourself enough in those classes, you don't see anything that reflects your experience and what you see in the daily life, that really hinges on your mindset. and it makes you feel like very low self-worth.
I guess to add on to Mineva's points about, I guess, these classes, as a student, I wasn't necessarily pushed to do something that is discouraging me. However, I was encouraged to take AP classes, and although the majority of our school are Asians or Pacific Islanders, usually these AP classes, majority of them are Asians. And there's this notion that all Chinese people are smart. And although that there's many people now that realize that not all, that the stereotype is not true, I still get the subliminal message in my AP classes, especially in like AP science classes, where I feel I have the feeling that I have to compete with these people, because usually for AP classes, the reason why people would take AP classes is to get college credit or to learn more about the subject in a much deeper level. But what AP classes has become is just a competition, or if not like just for college credit, instead of learning the actual topic itself. Well, there's some students that would take that class for that reasons, but it has becoming a culture where you have to take these AP classes or you're not going to get into a good college. And I think this is just some of the experiences that I have as a student that is being pushed into to do something at my school.
So in my perspective, I really haven't faced anything like so directly, because me personally, I want to take AP classes because that just fits in my career path. So that's just me. But one thing I've experienced is that we as students are made to like fit into the rules. Like for example, like I had a male counselor. I just didn't feel comfortable with him, but the administration would always be like, you have to go to him because according to your name that you just are stuck with him. And one time I really, really requested like a female counselor, and I had to wait about 2 hours to actually like talk with her. I feel like that isn't okay, because every student needs specific things, and just because their name just doesn't match or just whatever won't, doesn't mean that you have to take them out of your comfort zone. Because for some students, like school is the only place that they do feel comfortable at. And now at this point, like I've heard, and my friends don't even come to school, and they like seek counters from like outside like sources just because, and have to pay for that and stuff, which it shouldn't be a trend. Like I feel like school is supposed to be a safe place and not to actually fit in a certain rules just because the higher people expect you to.
Yeah, it's crazy how each and every one of us could say something like, oh, I've seen this, I've witnessed this, I've experienced this. And I'm sure that could be said about every single student in the state. Like, and I think that's incredible that we are still having this discussion. So if there was one equity related issue at your school that could be addressed, fixed, poof, gone, what would it be? I know there's a whole list that you could say, but just one.
Yeah, for me, one of the first things that pops up is just access to any kind of mental health help. So at my school, we have like over 2,000 kids, but we have 4 counselors, and none of them are like the specific like designated mental health counselor. They are all college and career counselors. So if you are one of those people that like wants to go to the counselor and you just need someone to talk to, chances are nothing is really going to come from that, because they're just going to be like sitting and like looking at their watch, and it's like, okay, time to wrap it up because you were so overbooked. Like 4 counselors for 2,000 kids, that's a lot. And the problem that I see, it's not just like, oh, I need someone to complain about. There are students who are struggling so much. Like I had a friend, and you think, oh, this is only applicable to the small minority of students. No, if you have that professional at school, they can help train teachers about how to recognize something and provide that connection. between, oh, like a teacher saying, oh, they were like just completely sobbing today. I think maybe you should get an appointment with the counselor. But even when you're a student suffering from a really serious mental illness, I had a friend who actually was hospitalized for 2 weeks, and this was during school. And instead of having a person that could deal with the communication with teachers, they had to be the one to email every teacher and say, this is what I did, and I had to go there, and now I have to email you this, and then sit in Zoom calls and have to look them in the eye as they like know this incredibly harrowing thing about her. And there should be that. No one should need to do that. And, you know, there's so many people that cannot have access to therapy outside of school, and it needs to be one of those things that we can provide. You know, it's one of the things that's becoming more and more of a thing for affluent people is getting those 504 plans, I think, you know, because, you know, if the parent is really involved in their students, like in their kids' education, they like really have the ability to like, oh, we're going to go see this ADHD specialist so we can figure out what you need. But so many people don't have that, and they're kind of just written off like, oh no, you're just this bad student. And when a student, like the second a student is led to believe that, oh, I did something bad, or, oh, it's my fault that I can't do well at this from a young age, the second that happens, you're just going to see a spiraling. And that's what we can't reverse when we get to high school. And that's why it's so hard to reverse. So there just needs to be that kind of support from a really early age.
Somewhere I want to see equity is in our education. I don't understand how it's fair for students of color to walk into a history classroom or whatever classroom it may be and only get to learn about their white counterparts' history. You know, at my school, white students are the majority, but that doesn't mean that they're the only students that matter or the only students that, you know, we should appeal to. Something that my school has always done is sugarcoat history to make it comforting for white students so they don't have to learn about the oppression about other students. But how is that going to make us leave our schools educated? I feel like most of my research and, you know, understanding of history for different ethnic groups has come from watching a movie or watching a TED Talk or reading a book. It's not fair because a lot of students, when they do learn about their history, it is about their oppression, you know, slavery or, you know, the Jim Crow laws, whatever it may be. That's not fair for them to only learn about their oppression, because how detrimental is that to students' mental health when they see, oh, my ancestors were just oppressed. You know, what was the good part? Why, you know, why does my history matter? So when we start adding in a more worldly perspective of the world, not only will it make our students more knowledgeable and leave with an accurate perception of what history was and how other ethnic groups contributed to society, not just white Americans. I think that is where equity needs to be implemented. And kind of adding on to what Shreya was saying about mental health is, you know, not all students have it easy. My friend went through a really rough patch with anxiety, mostly curated by school, the amount of pressure that was put on her. And she couldn't come to school because she was struggling so much. And when she reached out to her counselor, he said, just try to come to school, get your work done, you need to stay on track. Instead of saying, hey, what's going on? How can I help you with, you know, what's going on in your brain and everything? Like, she was going under so much pressure and she was told, just come back and do your work. We need to be better at our schools.
I definitely agree. From living in a place where it's sort of a bubble and just not a lot of diversity, equity should be first looked at in in teaching, because it all comes from there. And how then I maybe interact with other students will be, if we maybe taught them different, they would be more open-minded. If they knew other cultures, they would think different, say different things. So I think it definitely just comes from first looking at how we're actually teaching our students, and then it'll just it'll get better from then once we fix that.
Agreeing with what everyone else said, I think it's important that we do have a requirement for cultural, disability, and race issues as a class, because I go to a predominantly white school and I've never heard the N-word being thrown around as much as ours. And, you know, a lot of it is from our Black students, but a lot of it, even used in a derogatory way, is from our non-Black students. And I've heard a whole group of kids walk by and just talking amongst themselves about how they don't like the N-words. And two teachers are standing right by them and they did nothing. And I just find that in our schools, we need to have policies. I don't know if we do have a policies, but we need to fix enforcing it and having a stronger regulation restrictions on that, and no tolerance for that, because, and that so ties in with a cultural perspective learning kind of class, and why that should be a requirement is so that things like this, you know, going around the halls hearing bad things about our POCs, that shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be tolerated. And I feel like if you have a class that shows you why it's wrong and shows you how to be open-minded to all cultures and to different situations, that is what would help bring it together. And I'm not talking about just racial slurs. I'm talking about like LGBTQ, religious, cultural. I'm talking about all kinds of slurs like that. We need awareness on all kind of aspects so that our future generations don't grow up with that kind of mindset. Because when they do that, then you grow up with racist doctors or self-righteous lawyers that will, defend someone that obviously did something very bad. And these things start when we're young. And when our schools tolerate that, that creates a mindset into those kids' head, oh, this is okay. Yeah, nothing's wrong with what I'm doing. And that's why I think it's very important, just on how they push health and art classes as a 2-year and 1-year credit requirement for our class. Why don't we implement a diversity for all aspects, groups of people kind of class? Because we need to get out of the mindset that there's only one group of people, straight, white kind of males, or that they're the superior and that they're who we should follow. And I think the big issue on that with me is that I hate when I walk by that and I feel like if I speak out about it in my school, I'm just going to get hated on it because my school already tolerates it. And I do not want any of our younger class of 2038 or 2032 to feel that way. They should be exposed and have their eyes open that everyone is different. We're not all the same. You know, if we were all the same, I wouldn't have to experience racism through being denied bathroom access in Buckley, and you have to experience it through To Kill a Mockingbird. We're not all the same. And I think that it really needs to be implemented into, especially our high school, because that's when our minds are most malleable, into our high school curriculum, that everyone is different. And you need to realize that, and realize that we don't need you to walk on eggshells, but maybe act like you're skating on thin ice, because everyone has a breaking point. So you don't want to push past everyone's breaking point for that. And I think our school's curriculum could really do a way better job than they are right now.
I also agree with everyone what they say about these issues. Our school in particular has the benefit of being racially diverse, meaning that we have clubs that celebrates different cultures, and even majority of our teachers at our schools are non-Caucasian. I guess one particular issue that we have with our school is connecting with our school board members and teachers and students. And the reason why I brought it up is because I think one example is that during the killing of George Floyd, there was a Black student union that's trying to send a letter to the school board meeting about how we should take action. And they replied with this very general email saying how they support the Black student union and they're going to they're going to take these into consideration. And one of these considerations that the Black Student Union wanted for school board to do is to cut ties with police. And this could go on and on, but in summary, that's one of the things that they wanted to do. And so far, they've never followed up after that email that the school board has sent. And I think that's one of the reasons why that me and Shafaq wanted to started this project where we try to make connections and building bridges between students and staffs and school board members, because a lot of the issues that our school board member have is that the responses to certain topics or issues tend to be very vague. And for students and staff, I think especially during this pandemic, I think it's so vital, especially when we're going back to school, that we need communication. And if we don't get, and even though it is just saying, hey, we're still working on this certain issue, but still, I think constant communication is very important, especially when all students and the staffs are been forced to do their work at home, and even more especially for students who don't have the privilege to have access to good internet or good computers, good laptops, or some students have to use their phones because they don't have laptops or computers. So I think one essential issue that we have in our school in particular is just this gap between students and staff and our administration. I think that's something that our school needs to work on.
I feel like our school has to work on mental health a lot. Like, in my perspective, I feel like our school is really focused on getting as many honors in, as many AP classes in, and that is a lot. At one point, my counselor said to take 3 AP classes. That was a lot for me personally, and a lot of kids, and not even myself, are like struggling with other things outside of school, such as depression or like family problems and all that. And on top of that, they're overloading with us this. And our counseling are mostly on, okay, like running star AP classes, but whenever you talk about them about your mental health, they'll be like, okay, go see another counselor. I personally feel like a lot of people in our school particularly are more focused on redirecting and all that things, and sometimes we just need like our own like I had like an English teacher who was really good, and other kids like just had a particular teacher, but they still weren't helpful. And apart from mental health, I feel like teachers also have like a subconscious thing about colored students. Like, I took an American politics class, and they were saying that teachers have something called implicit bias. Like, they'll feel like kids with brown eyes would be more wanting to take help instead of blue eyes. Like, blue-eyed kids would be more willing to go out for recess more often, whereas brown-eyed kids, they'll be like, oh, do you need help? Do you need help? And that's something I feel like has just been ingrained in history. And from what I studied about that is that we need to really be more open about education and not make it be so whitewashed, because at the end of the day, kids are facing this discrimination just because on the color of their skin or eyes, and that we have to change that, like be more open about how our education is and history is, and not just make it, oh, whites are more privileged or higher up. And yeah.
So in my personal opinion, I think that if we're talking about curriculum, we're talking about the education system, it's not only how we're teaching our students, but it's also what we're teaching our students. So in my personal experience, I have had the privilege, and like I consider this to be one of the greatest privileges of my education so far, is that I have been able to look around a classroom and I've seen students who don't look like me, and I've seen students who look like me. I've never felt out of place in a classroom, and I know that that's not an experience that's shared by many students, and not many people could say the same thing. I just remember the statistics, so I just looked it up. My high school, Renton High School, is the 45th most diverse high school in the entire country, and 11 of those 45 countries of the 11 of the 45 most diverse high schools in the United States of America come from the state of Washington. So we really need to be setting an example on the sort of curriculum that we're offering our students, because I completely agree that ethnic studies needs to be implemented as a class, but it shouldn't just be that one class that's a requirement and then a box to check and then, oh, our education is somehow preparing our students. I think that's absolutely wrong. I believe that this sort of curriculum needs to be implemented in all of our classes. And something we noted earlier that we said was that in my personal experience in my education, my teacher, I remember really clearly in my sophomore year in my English class, she said that our books and our what we're reading should be used as a mirror and a window. So we should be able to see our own experiences in the curriculum that we're learning, but it should also be a window into someone else's experience that we would never be able to experience. So I was able to read stories that told the Latinx story, the African-American story, the Asian story, you know, those sort of narratives. And I think that's something that needs to be replicated in different classes and different curriculums. Another thing is that even though I go to an extremely diverse high school, I could count the number of students, I could count the number of teachers that I've had that are POC on a single hand. Most of my teachers that I've had since growing up were all white. And although you can have teachers that are progressive and you can have students who are appreciative of these efforts that these teachers are making, it's not the same as knowing the experiences of your students. So I think that racial equity training for staff and for teachers should be mandatory. And I think that students should have a say in what goes into this curriculum as well, because there's so many different microaggressions that could be perpetrated by these teachers that they wouldn't even be aware of. And teachers need to be able to listen to their students to know that they're giving them the best education possible, because there's so many other factors that could go into how well a student receives material, how well they learn, that really isn't talked about enough, especially in today's day and age. So if we're trying to really prepare our students for this like globalized or like modern education that we want to be, you know, on the front lines of, we need to be taking these things into account.
Yeah, thank you guys. I think the top two things that about everyone was saying was that representation and mental health. That's something that matters to most all students. That if you see yourself, oh, I just heard myself. Oh, sorry. If you see yourself in the things that you're being taught, it gives you the tools to be assertive, to see yourself as strong, to be able to use your voice. Like, we don't have the tools to do that if we don't see. We just see ourselves being colonized. Like, that's all you see. So I think that's really important to know. Just a note to audience members and panelists and board members, we'll move into audience questions in about 10 minutes, but just one more question and then we'll move into those. Okay, so feel free to comment them and we'll be answering those. So for all the inequities that you have seen in your school, I know some of you touched on this a little bit that you haven't, but have you seen any sort of protocol, any sort of policy that takes place if you see any sort of microaggression, either subtle or like very out there racism, any sort of consequence? Have you guys ever seen or anything like that?
Yeah, so at my school, I just say we're so behind. You know, I think a lot of district board members can kind of just pull out their little sheet and be like, we have it written right here that nobody's allowed to be racist, guys. That's it, problem solved. And that's the full extent of everything. My school actually had this situation where this girl, she was white, and there was this video of her bullying a Black student from another school and repeatedly calling her the N-word. And this was circulated all around our school, but it was kind of right before school started, so there was no actual intervention by our school. And, you know, what strikes me even more is the fact that there was no repercussion or no big school conversation at an assembly at like, hey, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. We need to teach you why this is wrong because something has failed. And, you know, later on as the school year progressed, it was like fall and it was like homecoming season. And this particular girl actually got nominated for homecoming princess or something like that. And we had this conversation, like I came up to my ASB advisor and I'm like, do you really think it's appropriate? She repeatedly said this slur to this poor girl who had literally done nothing wrong and nothing has happened. You haven't even had a conversation with her about if it's acceptable or like how it's unacceptable. And then the administration decided, no, it's okay. You know, it was like right before school started, so it's not really our problem. So she won homecoming princess. And that's what we put forth. It is okay if you say this, there will be no repercussions. And I think that is just a terrible example to set. Everyone was just, wow. You know, it can't just be, oh, this happened like 2 days before school started. Yeah, we don't have to worry about it. It's not our fault. It's not something we've not solved, this ingrained problem in our community. So I think it's important that we keep people accountable, because at the time, you know, I think when you're a student or when you're an underclassman especially, if you bring something up to that teacher and they're like, yeah, no, and then it's just like, okay, I just have to shy away. It's not my place. They don't want me here. So that's mine.
I would say the only protocol I've seen at my schools is ignoring the problem, because, you know, it's the easy thing to do. Or they say, oh, they're just kids, you know, they don't know any better. But those are the kids that are going to school and learning, while there's other students coming to school being traumatized and mocked. So what line do we draw? And it shouldn't even be, what do we do in case this happens? It shouldn't happen at all. Because why should students go to school and hear a racial slur and then have that directed towards them? When I was younger, I talked about this last time, but my grandmother is Korean, and she came to my school for a science fair or something like that, and a group of girls and boys would pull their eyes back and mock Asian people. And at the time, I was unaware of what that really meant, but I knew it was wrong. And one of my best friends is Asian, and she talks about how, because she went to the same elementary school as me, and she talks about how alienated she felt and how bad she felt going to school and feeling like, wow, I don't look like these people. I'm mocked. I'm just a joke. And what did teachers do about it? Nothing. And it was so apparent that it was happening. It was almost a trend to these kids, and teachers did nothing about it. So why are we allowing students to go to school and be traumatized? It should just be protocol on the first day of school, just like how you say, hey kids, don't run in the hallway. It should be, you can't say these words, you can't make fun of people's lunches, you can't do this or that, and then make sure it doesn't happen. And when it does happen, actually have there be repercussions for those students, so people know this isn't something okay to do, because you still see it in high school today. You'll hear kids walking in the hallway saying all types of slurs, and it's normalized, and teachers don't do anything about it because it's out of their reach. Or like what Shreya said, my hands are tied, you know, like I can't do anything about it, but you really can. You don't want your students going to school traumatized, because that is what's happening right now.
So I have like in 8th grade, in our history class, we're doing like a culture study. So everyone was telling about their cultures, and you made like a booklet and everything. And so I chose my dad's side. And so I had some, like, because he's Mexican American, I had like pictures of him on like, or not him, but like our family on chili farms and all of this. And of course, because it's predominantly white, mine was very different compared to the rest of the class. So my teacher, who is also white, she like reprimanded me, saying like my booklet was like, she even said it was like racist or something. And so she was trying to tell me what was appropriate for my culture when she's not from my culture, to the point where like my dad would go in and would be like, yeah, that is my culture. That's our culture. It was just crazy. And what's ironic is that she was not only my history teacher, but my leadership teacher. So that shows a lot. Like, that's kind of scary if that's who our leadership teachers are or whatever. And yeah, that's just the story I wanted to share.
I feel like I kind of mostly talk about inequities in the beginning questions. Like when we hear, I know I've heard a lot of the non-Black kids using the N-words to be derogatory against not even just Black kids, even grouping the rest of our colored students of color into that, and them walking by teachers and doing it. And so I think the thing with Ali, it's a big problem solver. It's just to ignore the problem And I know the only time that they ever really are sensitive is when we throw our annual MLK assembly and we kind of move on. It's like, okay, this is racism, guys, and MLK solved it, so don't go starting something up again. And then the rest of the year, it's okay, it's tolerated. And that's why I feel like the big thing is having that curriculum of the window and mirror is so important, because you need to know, you can tell these kids why they're wrong all the time, but nobody's going to care. And that's why it's important for our younger ones to grow up knowing why you're wrong about that, knowing why you can't say that. And those are like the big inequities I've seen. It's just the racial problems in my very predominantly white school, and ignoring the problem. I don't know if we do have policies, but I know dang well they're not enforced at all. And I think the big issue is my school's tolerance for slurs, and not just stopping at racial slurs. I'm talking about even against, especially against the LGBT community related slurs. You know, I see kids, our school has had someone commit suicide, and the only thing that happened was, oh, we are sorry for the family. But why don't you go into depth? Why don't you have an assembly on that? Why don't you help us understand, well, help those who don't understand why it's wrong to bully, why it's wrong to bully off of a choice, off of your sexual orientation, off of what you identify as, off of what you can't control, your skin color. And it's those tolerant things that my school let slide, that I feel it really, when you know that it's okay, you're going to grow up, you're going to be some successful person with that same mindset that you had in high school, and that is going to damage so many people. And our school needs to realize, you may not be our parents, but you're our guardians while we're in your school, while we're online. So you need to be dictating and regulating what we say, what people say about us, because I know a lot of our teachers are white as well. So when they hear those stuff, it's not affecting them. They don't care. But I walk by and I hear that. I may not be Black, but it sure as heck offends me. I do think that there's a problem with it. Just because it doesn't affect me directly doesn't mean it's not going to affect me and my path later on. Like this mindset that our kids have, that it's okay, it needs to be canceled by our school. We can't tolerate it anymore. And I think that's the biggest inequity, is our tolerance for just inequality in our school. Like, stop letting it slide. If you hear someone say something that's very racist or very against that marginalized group, you need to speak out about it. Students can only do so much. Of course, we can start fights for you to come and stop us, but it's not going to change anything because you guys let it slide.
I'm going to go a little bit off topic from the question, but Mineva brought a really good point about the Martin Luther King assembly. I think my experience with studying Dr. King is that in our school, we study it a little bit more in depth compared to other schools. It's still that whitewash education where we praise civic leaders or other people who does these amazing things as gods, and we put them on the pedestal. However, like at the same time, we also diminish these people, or characters assassinate these people because they did this one thing. And I think something that our school needs to do better is to acknowledge the good side and bad side of history. Instead of telling one side of the story, they should also tell different sides of stories, not just only Caucasian history, but also they should invest in studying more about Asian history, Latinx history, Black history. All of these things are very important, because that's what also made America, not just Caucasians that are on this land. And also Native American history are also really important. I think on the topic of microaggression, our school has the privilege to not, I think, of doing a good job at calling out people whenever students or teachers say like racist things. I think we do a very good job at holding each other accountable to make sure we don't be racist, or we don't say sexist things. But I think a particular problem that we have in our school is that there was one instances where a student said the the N word, excuse me, and as a result, the school has suspended him. And even though they made these policies to prevent students from saying the N-word, I still see people in my school that still say the N-word. And in one instance, I even heard a student say an N-word while the teacher is doing something, and the teacher didn't do anything at all. So it's going back to Mineva's point, which is that we have to hold each other accountable, even though that it feels uncomfortable to do. If we want to prevent from these type of things from happening, we have to hold each other accountable. And accountability is really, really important if we wanted to end these if we wanted to confront racism or sexism in our education.
In my perspective, I feel like our school just does not take action at all. Like, for example, when there was a topic about police brutality, right? And the school board would just be like, okay, we'll just post something on Instagram or something. But to be honest, the way I saw it as that they just want people to feel better about what's going on, but not actually do something. Like forget about race. Like when it even comes to like kids being mean to each other, they'll just be like, okay, we'll send you to the office. But again, they'll do the same thing again. Like I've been working closely with the school district, and I've seen that they really don't take action to what kids want. And they'll just like carry on the topic, just like carry it on. And we've been having so many assemblies about like rules and regulations, and kids just don't listen. But I feel like the main reason is just it's not being incorporated into the education system. Like coming back into the whitewash, they'll be like, even history is so like Caucasian washed at the same time. And I just really don't know. Like our school just can't bring themselves together. I just feel like our school district is mostly about all talk, no show, just to make people feel welcome, but it's not working at all.
Yeah, I completely agree with the whole all talk, no show thing. That's definitely been something that I've seen in my schools. I think that in my personal experience, so like I said, my school is like extremely diverse, and it's the most diverse in our school district. So something that comes with that is my school is always labeled the ghetto school, or it's the school that I'm sure you guys know what I mean. Like there's always that one school that's considered more, like the higher the population of students of color, then it's seen as, oh, they have more fights and they have this and that. So I think that in itself is just a really harmful stereotype that comes with my school. And I think that's something we also haven't touched on yet is gun violence in schools. So in my personal experience that I've seen, so the week that we was the last week of our school for this past school year in March, there was one day where there was a man with a gun that came 2 blocks away from our school, and our school had to go into lockdown for about 2 hours. And during that time, I was stuck in a back closet with like a group of my classmates, and we were all calling our parents and stuff. But did our administration come out and say anything after that about the event? No. And even worse was a couple of years ago, there was one incident where there was a post that went around social media where someone was, someone who wasn't a student, but they were a teenager that went to a different school in the area. They were threatening to shoot up my school, and that went around on social media. So what happened was the student leaders at my school, so ASB officers and then some like club leaders, they started passing around this information to students at our school to warn them to make sure that they knew what was going on, right? But when the administration found out about this, they penalized those students who were passing around that information because they said they were scaring these students. So it's just a sample of what goes on in not only my school, which really should be the progressive school because we're diverse, but really that's not the case. This is really just a fraction of what goes on in the schools that the administration really needs to work on, because after this incident that happened with half of our students not showing up to school because they were scared for their lives, all that happened was our principal came on the intercom, gave like a little 30-second speech about student safety and how we're going to protect our students, and then gave everyone pizza. I'm not exaggerating, that is exactly what happened. So it's things like this that really create distrust in the relationship between your students and your administration. And if you're really penalizing your student leadership for wanting to protect their student body, then I think that there is a serious issue that needs to be addressed with not only my school, but with schools in our area, in our state, and in our country. And there needs to be some work to mend this relationship and the distrust that students have with their administration.
Ooh, gun violence, school safety, that would be a whole nother panel. Thank you, Alicia, for that. We're gonna move into the audience questions now, so audience feel free, board members, to comment them. But one thing, the first question that came up was on ethnic studies. So Alicia brought up the window mirror type thing that you brought up earlier. That's super important. So what's something that you guys think you would want to see in an ethnic studies class? What do you picture it as? Who would teach it? Because I know we talked about it earlier, like it's a whole nother tool that you can have if you see yourself being represented as a strong, like, human instead of oppressed, that's a whole different thing. So what do you guys see? How do you imagine that? How do you think it would be? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm so glad this got brought up. For any policymakers, OSPI, listening, it is so important that it starts K through 12. This needs to be an ongoing journey. Ethnic studies, and also just having really inclusive, diverse curriculum. I know when I was in 3rd grade, that's when at the time, and so I was young, and I was oh, these I had this misconception. I was oh, gay marriage or gay people started existing 2 years ago, so that's why they made this legal now. And ever since then, we have covered no LGBTQ history ever. And the fact that you think that, oh, because we're never studying a Latinx scientist or activist, because we're never studying, they just don't exist. Because in my case, it's kind of oh, the only Indian figure we were really is Gandhi. And the thing is, that is time. Whoever can cause them in that you should have had the opportunity to know something. It starts so young, and when you don't hear anything, here, I'll do this. When you don't hear anything, you just think that it's not important. I personally don't feel like it's that,
Shreya, or did she? Shreya,
okay.
Try turning off your video if you're having connection problems, and it'll help with the audio.
Okay, so it's sorry. You think that because you're not seeing anyone, it's just not important. And to even encourage, oh, we need more Asian teachers to teach this ethnic studies, that's not going to happen right now. Teachers of color are not being treated very well either. And how are you going to encourage students to go into that profession where they never see themselves represented in the education? It needs to start from a really young age, because it's all about, everyone's goal in school is just to make sure that students can be well-functioning members of society. And you cannot do that if you can't appreciate other people's cultures and identities. So it needs to start really young, and it needs to, because when it doesn't start young, it's just oh, I'm just going to tune out in high school. There's no chance of changing my beliefs by now. My parents have been telling me this for XYZ years. So it's a massive failure when racism is still a problem at schools, and it's really
I 100% agree with what Shreya just said about starting young and implementing ethnic studies at a younger age. And maybe that doesn't have to be such an advanced course or anything, but that could just be adding in representation in the books that, you know, students read, or watching movies that have more representation. Because if you leave it until high school, the sad fact is that it's going to turn into a debate, because these students already have, you know, their ideas about different cultures and ethnicities and groups, and it's going to be hard for you to change their minds. I saw this video on students debating on whether the Confederate flag was racist or not in high school, and it was a giant debate. So, you know, little kids are so impressionable, and if you teach them from a young age that racism isn't okay, hey, this isn't okay, this isn't okay, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, they're gonna like soak that up and keep that with them. And hopefully they could even take that home to their family and it could just pass on, but we need that in our education. And so it can't just be, you know, in high school where we have one credit where you go to an ethnic studies class for half a semester, but it needs to be all throughout different grades. And it should definitely touch on the beauty of other cultures, how they've contributed to society, because a lot of students are clueless. Like, I know students that have said, I thought America was the only country with freedom. Like, is that the education that we're getting in our schools? Because that's definitely not enough. Our students are not leaving our schools educated, and they're gonna go into the real world and not know enough. And so that needs to be a priority in our schools, and it needs to be an ongoing conversation.
I want to jump in really quick. I just want to touch on something Ali said. I think the most important thing is to give like a well-rounded thing on all the great things other cultures have, because a lot of the things you see, like all you see from Mexico is Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. That's all you see. It's also compartmentalized. It's not like, oh, they're a part of this. It's not integrated. It's all, this is this, this is this. Like, it's, and I think that was really important to highlight. Thank you, Ali.
What I would like to see would definitely just be making sure that they touch on every culture, like as many as they can, because it would be like even worse if like they touch on like everyone but your culture. You just feel more excluded. So just making sure that they can touch on all the ones like that they can. And then also, like, if you don't see like a lot of POC teachers and then like they want to like try to like implement like teaching from a person of color, then maybe like getting leaders from the community, you know, leaders from different communities to come in and talk as like a special guest, because I think that could definitely be effective.
I think a lot, basically what everything that Ali and Margarita said was what I was going to say. I think bringing in, if you're not going to bring in every single culture, then at least try to bring in the culture that affected America. Because I know the road that I went on just right now, like an hour ago, 2 hours ago, isn't what our white Americans did today. I know dang well I-5 is not built by all the white working middle class citizens right now. And so like, we need to know that America was not built on just our white Americans. You know, why do we learn about, for when we learn historic science, we learn about Avogadro, Einstein, but we don't know about Robert Smalls or Percy Julian. And I just think it's important on bringing in different aspects. Stop, basically repeat what everyone said. Stop with the Eurocentric based history. Stop whitewashing it. You know, it wasn't just white people who won our wars, who won our Revolutionary War, Civil Wars. You know, you're forgetting very critical aspects. Our Native Americans did, our First Nations, our Black citizens. And it's disheartening, and it really, like I said, it really affects your mindset when you see all these Eurocentric based history. You're like, oh, so where were my people? Or so we didn't help out at all. But if you look, you know, dang well your culture helped out with everything. And I think that's such a problem, is that I have to learn everything that I know. I learned more about diversity and equity, equality in the last 4 months when school was canceled rather than in school, because all I learned in school was that, oh, the Europeans came over here. Yeah, we didn't steal, we colonized, okay? And it's like, please bring in different aspects. Stop making it seem like we just made this place better because they were all cannibalisms or they were sacrificing. It's like, just because the culture is different doesn't mean it's uncivilized. Just because you phrase actions with a different word doesn't mean it's not bad. And I think that's a one-way history. When you only see one person, our white population, helping out, you know, it made me feel at least like, oh, so what were we doing? Like eating coconuts on the island or something. And especially with our school and that incident of mine, it really damages your self-worth, and it makes you see your own people as a lesser. So when you see more representation into our curriculum, you know, maybe that's when I'll stop gassing on all our history, because right now it ain't it.
I think going back to what everyone said, I think this is why it's so important to implement ethnic studies from K to 12, is because that you can, I think for one semester of ethnic studies or one semester of civics, you can only teach so much about what's going on in the world. And for one semester of ethnic studies, there's not really that much to talk about other than just the general gist of what's going on for each culture. And for one semester, you can't talk about every single culture because that's going to take a really long time. So that's why it's very, very important that we start young to educate students about different types of culture. And like AJ said, to have different people from different cultures to come in to show examples of different types of cultures. And that's my take on it.
So yeah, I obviously agree with that. We need more different cultures and ethnic studies, but I also want to make a point that like we also have to have an ethnic like so in my school we have all of our, at least 99% of our teachers are white, and I feel like we have to be able to incorporate more cultural diverse like teachers in our background to be able to actually teach them, because if we don't have people who are actually ethnic, they're not going to be able to have a great take on it, if you guys know what I mean. So that's what I would want to point out.
So what I wanted to say is, I think this is a really, really important point to make, that an ethnic studies class or implementing ethnic studies in a curriculum the purpose of it isn't to affirm the experiences of POC, and it's not to like make POC students feel better or that their experiences are in our education. Absolutely not. I think that the purpose of an ethnic studies class or an ethnic studies course is to prepare everyone, regardless of what you look like or where you come from, for this modernized society and this like globalized world that our teachers want to emphasize to us. And I think that just saying that the purpose of an ethnic studies class is just to make POC students feel like they're included is kind of missing the point. And I wanted to also address a question that I saw earlier about, do you think it'd be challenging to teach ethnic studies to white students? I think the point that that's even a question is just emphasizing the issue here, that if you are a white student and you are uncomfortable with being taught ethnic studies, I think that that's just a display of like privilege, because there's one quote that I saw on a post on social media a while ago that says, white privilege is your history being taught as the required course and mine being taught as an elective. I think that that as a quote in itself just goes to show exactly what we're talking about. And I think that taking ethnic studies and making it this sort of checkmark requirement is just doing a disservice to why it exists in the first place. And another thing I wanted to address was, there was another question in the chat about intergenerational working together to kind of advocate for these sorts of things. And I just wanted to say that as a first generation American myself, neither of my parents were born in this country. They both immigrated here because of genocide and because of things that were going on in our home country, that our generation has more first generation students, more children of immigrants than any generation in our country before. And I think that if we don't take advantage of this and take advantage of the experiences that we have as individuals and that we share together, then it's a complete missed opportunity to kind of reinvent our education system in the way that it goes, because it doesn't just get better when you get to college, because like I'm going to the University of Washington, which is a university that prides itself on diversity. We are required to write an essay on diversity if we are to be accepted into the school, but there is only a 2-credit requirement for a diversity course at UW, and that is literally less than a single class. So I just wanted to say that although we're focusing on K through 12, it literally doesn't get better just because you go to college. And this is a conversation that needs to be held with education from K through, you know, your doctorate degree, if that's what you want to do, because it's such a structural and issue that's just institutionalized to the point where people don't even see that it exists. And that's what I wanted to add to the conversation.
To add on to what Alicia just said, you know, in my school, in one of my school years, we had an issue where the PLCs in our class wanted to experience an Indigenous Day. We wanted to like try out, and not really try out, but like know more about the culture. But our teacher said no, because that would be offensive or uncomfortable. But then on the day that we were supposed to do that, we had a Columbus celebration. And she's saying how that would make more people feel comfortable just because it's more normalized. I'm like, who did you ask? Because I know you dang well didn't ask the First Nations sitting right next to you. And that's the kind of thing that it's so toxic in our mindsets. Like when Alicia is saying how if teaching white students are going to be comfortable in ethnic studies, to be quite frank, I don't really care about your comfort right now, because my whole experience, do you think I even had an ounce of learning about my culture? No, it was always about yours. So if you can't feel comfortable learning about different, then that's your problem. You can drop the class. It's all right. But if it's a requirement, you know, deal with it. Because all of my classes, they have been a requirement where I had to be forced to push down my own culture and get this white is superior in my head. And I just think that's such an issue with our students. Like, why are you focusing? Because when you're talking about comfort, whose comfort are you talking about? Because I know you're not just discrediting the whole people of color's students in our school and talking about white comfort as if that's not what you did all 12 years of my education life. And so when people ask that question, like, isn't that going to be uncomfortable for your white classmates in an ethnic studies? Bump your feelings. I don't really care, because you need to learn. It was not white people who built this whole country. It was not your granddaddy who built the roads that I'm driving on. Like, you guys need to know that this country is very diverse. It was built on very much diverse, and that needs to be set straight.
Yes. Well, if it's not already clear to everyone, I think students now are ready for change, and in fact, I think it's long overdue. Real equity saves lives, and it's not just a fad at this point. It's not something you can just hop on. So please share, audience members, share this recording everywhere. Tell your friends to watch, to listen, to understand, not listen to respond. Yes. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you, panelists. You did great. I'm sure everyone was very grateful to hear your voices. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You guys are amazing.